say, I'm not going to let that push me into a biased position, right? When I look at data in my research, I want to be able to have the same tenacity that I try to disprove something as I do to prove it, you know? And so I started looking at, as a professional hunting guide, the amount of time that I spend out in very remote wilderness areas. The 9,000 plus hours I've spent through spotting scopes in the last 20 years, watching elk and bear and wolves and mule deer. And in all of this time, I haven't seen a Sasquatch again, not since I was 18 years old and had my encounter. And I'm talking about a lot of nights here, 700 and some nights out in the wilderness. I mean, this idea that 5 Bigfooters can go out on a 3-day weekend and have enough activity to write a book about and film a documentary, the narrative's broken there, in my opinion, because I'm spending all this time in these areas of northern Michigan and Wyoming and Idaho and Saskatchewan, and I'm not having those experiences. It's like if you take 5 motorcycle mechanics and send them camping after 4 days, they didn't have any Bigfoot activity. Why is the narrative out there the amount of these creatures that would have to exist in heavily populated areas of this country to support the narrative is a broken, flawed way of thinking to me. And that's what I did this first show on about a year ago, talking about this can't work like this. These puzzle pieces don't fit. And me and Nikki and Brent started having these conversations, and we started having them on Nikki's channel and Brent's channel and my channel. And, you know, the nice thing is we always involved 1 or 2 different people each time, and you could get other people's opinions on it. But all 3 of us felt the most important thing here, and Thomas has lived by this principle, is that if you don't agree with me, I'm fine with that. But articulately explain to me what your position is and why. If we can have these roundtables and have these hard conversations and not let rhetoric get involved, but just have real conversations on our thoughts and our opinions and articulately explain why we feel that way, I think we can learn an awful lot from each other. When we started talking about that narrative on Nikki's show, kind of tongue in cheek, I used your show, your channel as an example, when just because of the shock value of the title of the show, I had sex with Bigfoot. You know, I look at 90% of these channels, or maybe even more in this Bigfoot genre, are here for entertainment. And I get that. If you look at the last 10 years on TV, what Matt Moneymaker and all of these shows have done, they have approached the entertainment side of the subject of Bigfoot. I don't know how many people are going to them to learn, but everybody seems to be going to be entertained. And I think that's why you see a lot of the shock values in the show titles and stuff on so many different channels. Just get people there, get them engaged. How many of them are there really trying to research where the truth exists? What it comes down to is if they knew the truth, they might not be entertained anymore.
Very true. Very true. You name drop Thomas, so I'm going to go drop below you and talk a little bit about this with Thomas, because arguably, Thomas, well, not arguably, you have been doing this way longer than any of us have been looking into the subject. How have you found that trajectory over the last couple of decades with some of the salacious stuff that's happening, the change in the narrative? How do you read the Bigfoot narrative as it currently stands here at the end of 2024?
Well, and I'm only expressing my opinion. The biggest problem with the Sasquatch research community is the community itself. There are a lot of good researchers out there, but there are a lot of people who, like Jeff said, are in it for entertainment reasons. We are supposed to be researchers. That means we're trying to find an answer, yay or nay, okay? And it's just as important to uncover evidence for its non-existence as its existence. We are supposed to be researchers. We are not religious fanatics trying to push a faith. And too many people who call themselves researchers today, they're like a priest on a pulpit. You know, they're trying to push a narrative and they feel it's their job to convince everybody else. I gave up trying to prove the existence of the Sasquatch to the world in a whole 2 decades ago. I keep at this because I want to know. Okay. And if the Sasquatch does not and never did exist, it still has to be looked into anyway, because it's a great piece and a very important piece of our Western North American folklore mythology. And that alone makes it worth looking into. And of course, if it does exist, it's the greatest zoological discovery of the 21st and 20th centuries.
Very true. And I have to own up to my rookie mistake. For the first 5 minutes of the live, I did not hit the go live button. So if you guys are just joining us, we were live like 10 minutes ago, but you're just getting into the thick of things now. Everybody who's listening on the audio side is like, what is he talking about? But for the live listeners, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I apologize, I didn't hit go live. So let's go to Brent. Let's talk a little bit about the show that you guys did. We're going to get into, we don't have to necessarily do that yet because I want to go to Nikki, and then I'm going to bring, hopefully Pat will join us. I'm going to bring Pat on into the conversation as well, but talk a little bit about what the narrative means to you, Brent, because some of the things that you do on your channel, and certainly the Tall One's Black, Tall One's Dark, I apologize, Tall One's Dark. You look at some of these hoaxers and you look at some of this underbelly of the narrative of Bigfoot, and you kind of scrape away at that and pull away at some of these hoaxes and some of the things that people you just kind of shake your head and go, I can't believe people don't know this, but I'm going to be the one to explain it to them. So what does the Bigfoot narrative look like to you here as we end 2024 compared to maybe where it was 10 years ago?
Oh, seems like we're kind of in the same boat with it. I mean, I kind of started recognizing the difference between actual research and the actual Bigfoot narrative, I think around Expedition Bigfoot season 1, when what they produced was such a joke, but still considered research. And it's like, wow, that's weird. That's wild. And it's like, that's not research. That's entertainment. I mean, that's something sensationalizing a Bigfoot in order to, get on TV and stuff, because, I do a lot of boots on the ground, like more than most. And the actual research of the subject is really boring. Like it's hard to get people engaged and to watch it. And that's why you get the entertainment side that starts to sensationalize it. And that's where stories really kind of come into, where, you get unvetted stories that really get treated as fact, which really dilutes the actual truth of what's going on in the subject and makes it very difficult for people like us to actually properly research this subject and properly talk about it in settings where people are so convinced that Bigfoot is behind every tree in every city park. And that's just really not the case. And so it's a real challenge for us to try and present a realistic side to what's actually going on in the subject. And for me personally, I like examples, and that's why I try to use people who I come across hoaxing are, I think that really kind of helps show that what I'm talking about, that we do have to be careful about the narrative that we are taking, because it might not be real. We need to do a due diligence on properly vetting this stuff out. And, so that's kind of what I've been doing for last many years and stuff. And it's just, I try to balance it out on trying to do actual boots on the ground and just try to help trying to help people understand this subject in a way that they probably didn't before. And it works. I've had hundreds and hundreds of people commenting on all the various videos that I've did, thanking me about actually having these type of discussions, because it's stuff that they didn't know about, or they didn't look at it in a certain perspective. And so I know it's effective and does help a lot of other people. And, that's all I'm trying to do, is just trying to make, my journey into the Bigfoot subject as honest and true as possible, and helping other people that are around me are kind of checking in on my journey to maybe have a perspective of what what an honest research looks like. And again, it's really incredibly boring. I don't have any evidence that I can sensationalize or anything like that, because I do a due diligence of vetting all this stuff out while I'm out in the woods. And I think something like that is incredibly important to do, and isn't really being done in the subject now, because it's more about people are starting to try and be influencers in the subject. As far as the LARPing, I can name off dozens of channels of people who are creating this Bigfoot narrative only for a self-serving purpose, which is to gain followers, money, whatever the case might be. It's kind of happening. And it's just, like I said, it's just something that we need to kind of better understand and be allowed to talk about. And I get that it's really difficult for people, because some of the people, evidence, or whatever I bring up, a lot of people are emotionally attached to it, which is could be problematic when you're trying to have a discussion with them, because they get so emotionally attached to it that they protect it as if it's their own child, which I get. And I try to use kid gloves and really try to understand their perspective of what I'm trying to tell them. And that's why I've told multiple people, like, hey, I understand you're upset right now, but just process the information and come back and talk to me if you change your opinion. And I've had multiple people do that. And so it goes to show you that you can have effective communications. It might not happen right away, as far as making your point across, but you're planting the seed for all these people to help nourish themselves and better understand. And for me, I think it's just kind of part of what I do, for whatever reason I do it. And but like I say, I try to keep it balanced, and but I think that it's an important discussion, and I applaud you for having us on here, for for having it. And because it helps us better understand the Bigfoot subject as a whole, because in a way, we need the entertainment side, because it helps promote Bigfoot to the mass people. And so we actually need that, but you guys also need us to help bring integrity and honesty into the subject. So it's that blending is where we're having a really difficult time right now. And it's understandable, because we're now communicating in a way that is instant, and ways that we weren't able to do, like 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we're still trying to learn that out, and having these discussions, I think, helps us better understand that.
There's a reason you were the first ever guest on that Bigfoot podcast. It's that right there. It's exactly why Wayne and I had the conversation with you originally. Nikki, you started all of this. This show was on your channel. You guys were talking shit about no, I'm just kidding. So let's talk a little bit about the narrative and what that means for you, Nikki, because you do very much a lot of what Thomas does, what Brent has echoed, what Jeff has said in the subject, and you do these deep dives and look into this subject in a different way than most people. What does the narrative look like for you here in 2024? What's changed for you over the last couple of years, and where do you think this is heading for the Bigfoot community?
Well, for me, my channel came about because I was tired of seeing the same things over and over again that had been explained. They had answers. We knew they were hoaxes. We knew the people doing them. Yet we all know that what happens on, in groups is that people change the story around. This was captured over here in Alaska when it really happened in Michigan. This happened here. They change it up. They make it their own. But I got tired of that when I knew the answers. So hence I started my channel to tell people, no, this happened here. It was a student film done by Sean Bannon, and all this is just a creation, a film. These were the type of things that I wanted to do on my channel, because you really didn't have a whole lot of people doing that type of stuff, showing it over and over. You have great channels like, Squatch DTV with Steve Kulls and his investigations and stuff like that. But I wanted to be continuously showing people, look, the information is out there, because the biggest thing you have the internet now. All you have to do is sometimes drop that photo into Google Images and it will lead you to amazing places and answers. And that's what I wanted to do. And during these last couple of years, I took it further. I wanted to have discussions about research, about investigations, about where and how could we, as everybody says, get the ball down the field further. Those were the type of questions and I had. So hence came Debating Bigfoot. This show I had on Sunday was, my idea about it was, we debate about everything, because the Bigfoot community is quite small considering the outside world. Okay. A lot of the outside world thinks we're crazy. They just assume the PNG is absolutely fake. It's a guy in a suit, somebody confessed, and that's the end of that. But for us in our community, we do have these discussions, but we have the sides, right? We have this side that's a little paranormal. We have this side that's a little scientific and skeptical. We have the critical thinking, for what everybody else calls the woo side, wanting alternative answers, that if you can't find the answers, they tend to go that way. But there was so much more. There's the scientific, there's the anecdotal evidence. Those in itself cause a great deal of debate in this, community. And that's where we were taking it. And part of that, led to talking about, well, your show, we love you. We loved your show. We're all subscribers. But you could see, when he mentioned the Bigfoot, the title of one of your shows, we were like, whoa, that's kind of different. It's kind of like, I made a mention of it, kind of goes like Inquirer or World News type of wowness to it, and that's where we started to take that whole conversation.
Coast to Coast AM with Brian King Sharp.
Well, Brian, let me jump in real quick, Brian. I think, I watched the episode too. I think most everyone's issue was like the title, basically, and why you chose to put that out, especially after you had already released it to podcast. And I think Pat was the one that said you sat on it for like a month. You sat on it longer than a month. You sent that to me the night that the night that you recorded it. You sent it to me before it was edited or anything, and you said, "Man, I knew it was going to happen. I just didn't know when. But finally, somebody claims to have boned a Sasquatch." And you sat on that for months.
Good job, buddy.
And, yeah, the reason you put that out, I mean, it took you forever to release it to podcast first, but then again, the reason you put it out months later on YouTube was an experiment. And your experiment was 100% accurate, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm going to bring Pat on first. We've got to bring Pat. He's been waiting in the wings. Speaking of his own perspective on Bigfoot, we got Squatch Talk in the house. Pat, welcome to the show, man. What's going on?
Hey, what's up, Brian, Wayne, Bigfoot boys,
Hey, Pat.
all you fine
What's up, man?
people.
What's up, buddy?
What's up?
We're hanging in like Larry and a biscuit, man. This is our first time actually talking face-to-face since we had a little bit of a public falling out a while back. We have communicated via text privately,
Yes.
but I
Yeah.
would like to personally extend a thank you for coming on the show and showing your face and having the conversation, Pat. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that you are here. Same question for you, man. Before we get into I want to get into some of the nuances and some of the details behind
Sure.
my experiment and some of the things that I did recently with those episodes. But same question to you, Pat, really quick. What does the narrative look like for you and Bigfoot, and how has it changed over the last, say, 5 to 10 years for you when it comes to the Bigfoot phenomenon itself?
See, like part of it is a learning experience, is actually learning, because I've been here about 10 years. Swimming the water's pretty deep. And so that's kind of been a journey of observation and learning. So a lot of that narrative was in play even when I was back in the day gobbling up, Chronicles episodes and thought that Albert Ostman's story was like fascinating, right? So that part of the narrative's always been there. But how I've seen it change, Brian, is of course the internet and then StreamYard coming along. And then there was a weird lag time where, StreamYard's been here for a minute. And it took everybody either like the technological catch up to use it because maybe their phones were outdated or computers or whatever. But once StreamYard like really clicked in, probably around COVID or whenever, then boom, we went from 50 Bigfoot shows to 500, and we're probably at 5,000 now. And so that anybody with a modern phone could just go straight into a show. They could be on a show, they could host a show, they could get into shows in any form so easily. And then that's when I saw the Bigfoot narrative just skyrocket into this absolutely was unrealistic narrative that is contradictive to a lot of staples that have always been there in the Bigfoot world. And so when I started putting the contradiction to the explosion of narrative that it just can't match reality and the contradictions are there, that's when I really started using that word a lot a couple of years ago. I've been kind of cramming it down the Bigfoot world's throat ever since. So yeah, I've seen that change, and technology is a part of that change where everyone in chat can go make a show right now and say whatever they want about Bigfoot.
Yes, but let me talk a little bit about the shows that we're talking about as far as the episodes that I put out. Like Wayne said, I recorded this episode with Ryan from Canada, who claimed to have had sex with a Bigfoot when he was 16 on a camping trip with a bunch of other kids, right? And I had no idea. Pat has even said, he said it on the episode with Nikki and Brent and Jeff over on Sasquatch Secrets. I don't vet people who come on the show. We have very limited interaction beforehand because I want to have a true reaction, just like the audience, to these people's stories. I don't want a big narrative sent into me. I don't want to get into pre-interviews. I've had people that refuse to come on the show because I wouldn't pre-interview. And I'm like, well, just go to another podcast. I don't do that. That's not part of what I do here. I want to hear your story for the first time when I sit down, just like we are right now. And if you watch that episode of Sex with the Sasquatch on my YouTube channel, that's one of the reasons that, among many, that I released that to YouTube, because I'm over 500 episodes of the podcast in, and I've only got 100 and some odd videos up on my YouTube channel. There's a lot of things that don't make it to YouTube, but I put that up specifically for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, I despise clickbait. I don't like the Todd Standing. I don't like the Sasquatch Ontario, Mike Patterson, Sasquatch farting, taking selfies bullshit that people put out there. But I'm going to tell you, I did this about 6 months ago on Instagram. I was not getting any traction. There are some huge Bigfoot channels on Instagram. I have one of the biggest Bigfoot podcasts in the world. There are over 3.5 million podcasts in the world. Sasquatch Odyssey is in the 0.05% of all podcasts in the world. I should have more than 3,500 people following me on Instagram. But you know what? I don't put out bullshit on Instagram. I try to stick to science. I try to stick to interesting facts about Bigfoot, what's actually going on with our production and what we're doing on the show. Guess what? People don't give a shit about that. They want the sensationalism of the greatest Bigfoot evidence ever captured, Todd Standing. And it's the same fucking video he recorded when he faked it 12 years ago. That's the reality of what's going on in Bigfoot. So I did a little experiment over on my social media. And guess what? When I took some clickbait videos and just reposted them from one of the many of the Instagram famous Bigfoot shows that do that on Instagram, guess what happened? 1,000% increase in likes, comments, and interaction on Instagram. I gained hundreds of followers literally overnight. And I did this experiment a couple of times just to make sure that I was right. Clickbait works. It's just that simple.
We had that conversation, Brian, when I had moved my show over to the Untold Network with Doug, and you were doing a show there. And a lot of times us hosts would get together and have conversations about the marketing and how we're, getting that channel going. But me and you had a lot of conversations on our own of, I felt like I was doing a nuts and bolts type of research approach, and I was surrounded by shows that were really playing to the center ring of the circus in some aspects. And I didn't mind that contrast. I mean, I kind of felt like it made my show stand out even more as being the one that, but we had conversations about, you were talking about, I feel like putting out a show that's like this or with this type of a title just to see what kind of response it would bring. I mean, we were having those conversations of what would you get back in return for it? Not that anybody was thinking of selling out, so to speak. It was trying to figure out what's the best way to market something. And I think a lot of these shows kind of started using the shock value type titles to get the clicks. And maybe they weren't planning on doing an hour and a half long circus. They just set the title up that way to get people to come. And then they'd run a fairly decent show. But I think eventually, as the threshold kept getting raised and raised and raised across the community, it just kind of became this chaotic landscape of entertainment. And for somebody who's new, I mean, we've all been at this for a while, right? But imagine walking into this subject brand new today, looking at, like Pat said, 5,000 channels out there. Where do you start?
Yeah.
If you're looking for the truth and not just to be entertained, where do you start?
Well, that's one of the biggest problems, Jeff. So many people love hearing great stories about Santa Claus, but boy, do they hate it when you shoot them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's very true. And here's the thing. I was not an idiot. I knew exactly what was going to happen because I knew when I aired the show, and I actually, Pat, it wasn't a month, dude. It was like 6 months I sat on this before I aired it because I knew people. I had already established myself as a serious person in Sasquatch, and I still am very serious about this. I started my show to become a repository for information that I could draw from and then share with other people. And we can go back 10 years from now and listen to some of those episodes that I recorded from people who had experiences in Florida, believe it or not, Pat. They have experiences in Florida. I kid because I love. And then in the Pacific Northwest, you have both of those things happening. And every bit of data that we can mine as far as Bigfoot is concerned, in my opinion, is good data. Even somebody who sits down in front of a microphone and tells me that they believe they had sex with a Sasquatch when they were 16 years old. If you watch the video on my YouTube channel right now, where you guys are watching us more than likely as we speak, you can see my face. I am gobsmacked at what this dude is saying when this shit is rolling out of his mouth.
Yeah, his flabbers were gasted, y'all.
Yes, my flabbers were gasted, but I knew the second that I recorded that, people were going to hear it. And I tell you what I did for 6 months before I actually put that out on the audio side of the podcast. I did speaking gigs and I did conferences for 6 months. And to everybody that come up and shook my hand to get an autograph or buy a book or buy a t-shirt or whatever I was peddling at the time, I'd have a conversation and say, hypothetically speaking, if this guy were to tell me a story about banging a Sasquatch when he was 16, is that something that would shock you? Oh my God, yes. You got to put that episode out, Brian. We've got to hear this guy talking about his experience.
Yep.
So eventually, after many conversations with people like Doug and Wayne and other people that I trust in my circle, I eventually put it out. And guess what it was? One of the most popular episodes of that I've ever put out of my show because of the title. I understand the business I'm in. Here's where I think I have a problem. And here's where I think the disconnect comes with people like Pat and sometimes even Jeff and probably Brent and certainly Nikki, who look at me like, what is this guy doing? He's playing to the crowd. He's doing this National Enquirer kind of show. But here's what I figured out. I want to know answers about Bigfoot, right? I want to get as many people involved in the subject as I possibly can. My show is very popular, but not everybody who's into Bigfoot knows who I am and listens to my show. But I try to do as much good in the community as I can and get as many people involved and interested and give them as much positive information and true information about Bigfoot as I can. But sometimes to get them in the door, you have to put your entertainment foot forward. And here's the difference in me and a lot of podcasters. There are other people out there who shall remain nameless, who are at the top of the heap when it comes to Bigfoot podcast, who never set foot in the fucking woods. They don't care if Bigfoot exists. They know probably that Bigfoot doesn't exist. And guess what they do? They put a lot of shows out and they charge people $7 a month to listen to extra shows. And they make tens of thousands of dollars every month off of Bigfoot. Everybody knows that.
They're the modern day Biscardis that nobody's throwing a rock at or pointing a finger at. And, you know, when I look
here's
at
the question, though. Here's the question, though, Jeff. If that is their business model, what's wrong with them doing that if they make that their business? And let me finish. Here's the problem with me, I think. I have tried to straddle both sides of the fence because I recognize I am an entertainer. People tune into my show to be entertained. They don't tune in to hear my dumbass. They tune in to hear the entertaining people that I am cultivating and bringing in to tell their stories. That's why people tune into my show. I use that to try to do the rest of the things. I wrote a very scientific-based book about Bigfoot. I tried to write a book that people could pick up, whether it was Thomas, who's been in this for 50 years. He might look at that and say, man, I never looked at it that way, or I never looked at that story that way. Or somebody that just came into this could pick it up and say, damn, I didn't know that about Bigfoot, or I didn't realize that story happened, or that's interesting. So I try to do all of those things. But here's the difference in me and somebody, say, like the other person I just described. I truly care about whether Bigfoot is real or not.
Sure.
I actually live in the woods. I actually have been to multiple continents looking for these things. And guess what? I do boots on the ground research, and I highlight those who do boots on the ground research on my show, unlike other shows who don't give a shit about researchers and say they're cancerous and they shouldn't be breathing the same air that everybody else breathes for whatever reason, even though they're the ones who cultivate most of the interest in that and bring the money to your front doorstep. But again, I digress. If that's how you want to do your business, that's fine. Here's the problem I think people have with me is I'm looked at as both. Brian is an entertainer. He has a very popular show with a lot of people that he entertains. And then when I do something that's not in line with the boots on the ground, hard-nosed researcher, I'm punished for it. And I just don't understand that dichotomy. It's very hard for me because I care deeply about both. I make no qualms about it. I make a damn good living being a podcaster. That's how I pay my bills, and that's how I support my family. So I'm always going to do that, but I'm never going to push a false narrative, and I'm never going to hoax shit, and I'm never going to lie and grift people to make that money. I'm going to do it as honestly as I possibly can while dipping the toes in both sides of the fence. So I don't know.
And I think
I agree. I'd like to opine on that, actually. Agree,
okay.
Brian. And I've always seen that in you is that both sides of the fence thing. And I think that's fair because really, you know, what could be bad for business is taking a position, and you're not afraid to take a position. Okay. So I've always respected that you have like that Bigfoot podcast, which I'm sure is wildly successful, where you and Wayne take positions, and you sometimes you guys call out what you think is BS, and I'm like, wow, that's really risky as a guy that's doing an encounter show, you know, but it's worked for you. So as far as all that goes, dude, I don't think you should get lost in the minutia of the dichotomy. It's actually working for you, and just be true to yourself, period. You know, and don't be afraid. Like what you're doing now shows that you're like, hey, we can have an honest conversation. I can reach a big audience. I can take this to my big audience and I'm not going to lose 3/4 of them. And I appreciate that. I actually commend you for it. So please, yeah, like, dude, I know you get bad comments. I know you get thumbs downs. I know you get, bad ratings. But
I
dude,
get Kaiju Ninja saying, I just want to
killing
be
it.
like Wes Germer. I'm just kidding, Kaiju. I love you, man. I don't know you.
Well,
Dude, I do read the
Well,
comments.
that whole Wes Germer thing is okay, oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Pat.
God.
Go for it.
I just want to say, like, yes, I mean, Brian, like with that, no, because Wes would never, he would never stick his neck out like that. Wes never takes opinions. He never gives an opinion very much. Very rarely will he, Wes would not put on a show like this. And so, like, commend you for like going above and beyond in a wider scope outside of the good old boys club. Like,
Maybe
you're an
he's
open
just
book.
smarter than I am. I don't know. Maybe he's just smarter than I am. I don't know.
I don't know,
That's what
dude.
it is.
You rattled on numbers. They're very impressive. So you're good.
What were you going to say, Brent? I thought you had something to say there.
Yeah, well, you were talking about shows that offer up just like stories and information, and what's the harm in it and stuff. And well, if we look at Sasquatch Chronicles, with Wes Germer, his original encounter was proven to be a hoax. So he built his whole show off of a lie. And the thing is he's actually an employee of the channel. It's actually ran by this guy in Texas and stuff. And so. And Wes Germer, he created this whole narrative of this very aggressive Bigfoot. And while crapping on people like us, Thomas, and others, trying to present real information, trying to say, no, that's not how things are or stuff. But Wes Germer, he successfully, I might add, created this whole false narrative about Bigfoot out there, what we should all watch out for. And he has people on there that, most of them are fake. Sure, he does have some real people on there, but most of them are fake. Probably paid actors or whatever the case might be of, somebody on there to tell a story just to kind of make an episode so he can charge his $7.99 and stuff. So that's actually one of the core issues in the whole narrative driven aspect of this subject, why I brought up Wes Germer like many years ago, to kind of use him as an example of, hey, look what's wrong. This is one of the biggest podcasts in Bigfooting, one of the biggest influences in Bigfooting. We all listened to it, we all loved it, and it's all fake. It's based off a hoax, a lie. And that is amazing, because people invite Wes Germer to all these conferences and use his show as to help better their own show. But I think that whole Wes Germer Sasquatch Chronicles is a great example for everybody to realize that we need to watch out for narrative driven propaganda stuff. And that's a great one right there.
Yeah, when Wes started that show, he had, as we all know, he had Will Jevning on as like a co-host, and he was a big part of starting that show. And then as soon as Will started looking into Wes's story and saying, "Oh, I don't know what all is going on here. I'm going to call bullshit," then all of a sudden, Wes hates researchers. He can't stand them. And I know Brian has personal experience to this that he's never spoken about, and he'll talk about it when he's ready, but it has something to do with that. And I've heard Wes talk about the Sasquatch community is a cancer, and it may be, but the same cancer is one that's made you very wealthy. I lost all respect.
Yeah, it's hard to square that circle.
Yeah, he's just an employee for Sasquatch Chronicles. Somebody else actually owns it, and he's just an employee. So,
but he had to sell it at one point, right, Brent?
He sell it?
Did he sell
was actually
that?
No, he was actually getting paid by this guy in Texas before Sasquatch Chronicles was started. That's why
Really?
Wes Germer was so important. Yeah, and actually I can provide evidence for a lot of the stuff I'm talking about. But that's why it's so important that Wes Germer, no, there's no Pat, but that's why Wes Germer, it was so important that he had his encounter that he did, because he needed that in order to establish his podcast, in order for him to be an influencer because of the experience that he had. That's why he made up that whole story. He was never even on the mountain that night. Without a doubt, he was not on the mountain that night. But he used that story to create his narrative, his little empire that he created. But yeah, it's he's getting paid before Sasquatch Chronicles was even started.
People are in a hurry. You know, they're in a hurry. They don't do it the old way. Like, I'm strictly old school. I did it the old-fashioned way. You know, research, catalog, you know, study. I mean, my motto has always been stick to the facts and never deviate from the facts. To me, the Sasquatch mystery is a serious zoological investigation. And when I see, and it used to really irritate the hell out of me when the internet first came out, people who would, you know, make light of the whole thing and basically make the whole subject look stupid. But I slowly coming around. I mean, there's entertainment value there too. And even though it still rubs me the wrong way all the time, you got to have that balance, you know. It is important for people to have I mean, I'm just imagining what this show would have been like if we had the late Rennie DeHenne, the late John Green, the late Grover Krantz sitting here right now.
Oh my God.
Boy, that would have been a hell of a show to see.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. Let me talk about a couple of things here. Let me first go to Kaiju's question here or comment. But Brian, there are many podcasts now that seem to try to become as successful as West, though. I don't mean any respect, but look how many there are now. Look, dude, it's really simple. We've talked about this. Wayne and I have done an entire show over here in the past about the business of Bigfoot. Bigfoot, let's not beat around the bush. Bigfoot is big business. Bigfoot sales, period. Everybody knows that. And I'm going to tell you something. When I started my podcast, I did not start my podcast to become a big, huge podcaster or beat out any other podcaster. I started it for the very reasons that I've talked about many times. I wanted to document as many cases of people having encounters with Bigfoot as I possibly could in the southeastern United States specifically. And when I figured out that what I was doing was resonating with people and it became popular and I started making money doing it, it's capitalism, dude. I was working a shitty job, working 50 hours a week, managing 50 people, driving 2 hours a day, doing a job I hated to do. And I was making almost as much money doing this podcast as I was making at that shitty job. It's a no-brainer for me to quit my job. And yes, I am always going to try to be as successful as anybody who's in this business and try to be more successful than them. If you're not doing that, then you should probably not be doing whatever the fuck it is you're doing. You should do something else. So yeah, I'm going to try to be as successful or more successful than him. Some people argue that I'm better at my job than other podcasters. I'm great either way. I'm just going to do what I do and always do what I do. But just to compare other shows and say, yeah, but you copied. Did McDonald's copy Wendy's? Did Wendy's copy Burger King? They all have burgers and they all have drive-thrus. It's just a matter of who came first. Probably McDonald's and then everybody else. But if they make a better burger and better fries, then you should probably go through their drive-thru versus the other guys. That's all I'm going to say. Go ahead.
I think one of the big things is not to be like a Wes Germer. Don't hoax, don't lie, don't create fictitious entertainment stuff that you know is fictitious, I don't ever strike you. You don't ever strike me as that type of person, Brian. Never strike me. So I wouldn't ever consider you to be in that category. And I wish you all the success. That whole sex episode that you did with Bigfoot there. I actually just listened to it, and it was entertaining. Something that got me by. None of us complained when Art Bell was doing his coast to coast and had all these people on there. So it's like, why complain now? Is he out there like I said, doing a Wes Germer type of thing? Art Bell wasn't. Are you? No. So that's okay. So we all loved Coast to Coast. We all love Art Bell. I actually, watching that episode, you actually kind of reminded me of Art Bell with just sitting there and letting him talk. It's like, what do you say? Really? Just let him do his whole thing. And it's like, you could tell, it's like, I could tell that you
Yeah.
didn't really believe it, but it's okay sometimes to give people like that, just whatever. It's like, okay, he said he had sex with Bigfoot. You know, you don't have to believe it. It's sometimes entertainment's okay. And like I say, sometimes, you know, the research side needs the entertainment side and vice versa. We need to have that balance together, like kind of Thomas was talking about.
Yeah. And you knew that Art Bell used to ask hard questions to his guests. The guy who took it over just agreed with everybody on everything. And that was
well, he knew when to ask, to ask like the hard questions, or you know, but yeah,
Art,
you know,
his name is, he took
Coast to
he took
Coast. I mean,
Yeah.
Coast to Coast was a syndicated show back in the day where like none of this existed, right? And it, you know, he had a big voice over big airwaves, which is the way it used to work. And it was entertainment, and everyone knew he was syndicated for one reason. He was entertaining. People love spooky stories. Hey, let's do a show about spooky stories. And just like this guy, Art Bell was perfect at, you know, managing that, right?
And here's the thing that people, I think, sometimes have a hard time with is the entertainment part of Bigfoot. And I know I heard you guys, you were kind of casting aspersions and making, and I feel the same way on some level about some of the Bigfoot conferences and some of the things that go on there. People just slap Bigfoot on everything and they sell everything and people just gobble it up. But the entertainment part of Bigfoot is what draws people into the subject. By and large, Finding Bigfoot did, you know, I'm good friends. I love Bobo. I love Cliff. They're dear friends. I know Renee, Matt, Moneymaker. I know them all. Finding Bigfoot did so much and then destroyed so much all simultaneously for Bigfoot, right? It brought it into the zeitgeist for everybody. It brought it into everybody's home. And Expedition Bigfoot, I've never watched either show, frankly, to be honest with you. I'm probably going to get canceled for that. They said I wasn't a real researcher because I hadn't seen The Legend of Boggy Creek, but now I've watched that. But I've never watched Expedition.
But
That's the bar for research.
Oh, he hasn't watched it. I'm out of here.
I've probably watched 1 or 2 episodes of Finding Bigfoot. I've gotten more Finding Bigfoot from hanging
You've
out.
seen Harry and the Hendersons, though, right?
I have, right? But I've gotten more from Finding Bigfoot from Cliff and Renee and Bobo, just hanging out with them. So I don't need to watch the show. But what I'm saying is, it does a lot to bring people into the subject and to get people interested, even in some cases, academia. And I know a lot of people, I know Nikki, Brent, and even some cases you, Jeff, and probably Pat, look at me putting out a show about sex with Sasquatch. We had an email from a lady who claimed her grandmother claimed to have had an encounter with a Bigfoot at an early age and had the Bigfoot's baby. I read that story on the show and produced it right after this. And I specifically put that out on YouTube after this one, just to prove the point of sex clearly sells and clickbait clearly sells. But that brings people into the subject. But I try to, as an entertainer, then turn around and write serious books about the subject, bring on serious researchers, go and have serious conversations with people at conferences, and try to bring that to as many people as possible. Let's face it, if I didn't have a popular Bigfoot show, I wouldn't have written a book. I wouldn't be invited to do speaking gigs all around the world and take Bigfoot to the United Kingdom and other places that I've gone and talked about it, if I weren't an entertainer on some level. So it's a double-edged sword because I'm very serious about the subject. And in order to get some of those things done, you have to make money to live. I make a good living off of my show, and then I'm able to take that and put it back into the Bigfoot research. And I tell you what, I can't really get into it at this point, but I've had my sightings, 3 sightings in 2 fucking days, because I have a show that allowed me to be filming what I was filming at the time and be where I was, to actually see Bigfoot and answer that question for myself. And now I can go and tell people I know these things are real because I've seen them. Had I not had any of the success of being a podcaster, I would have never been in the place I was when I was with the people that I was to have that experience. So it's all worth it to me. Now, there are plenty of people out there who take the entertainment part of this to the nth degree, and they're used car salesmen. I said it earlier.
That's one of the things that I was going to touch in on is the hard truth is the people here to be entertained outnumber the people looking for the bare truth, probably 20-1. Okay. And one of the things we learned when we were introduced to the entertainment side of finding Bigfoot and seeing this on TV was, one, they were so masterful in how they cast this. Because like you, Brian, I've met Cliff and I've met Renee. They had that so perfectly cast. They had the guy who will say anything that happens is Bigfoot. They had the skeptic and Renee questioning everything. They had Bobo as the laughable buffoon who just you found the humor in. And they had Cliff, the science guy, right? And they just had that right balance. But one of the things that defined whether you were here to be entertained or here to find the truth, I realized existed on that show. And it was an easy meter to figure out which side of the fence you're on. When they would tree knock or when they'd call blast and they'd listen for the reply, they played the haunting music over it. And from a research standpoint, I'm like, turn the music off. I want to hear what you're hearing, right? The entertained person was there saying, man, the spooky music, it's making me feel, like they were into that
found
mood,
Bigfoot.
right?
They never found Bigfoot. I'm not making a joke, but
So, but my point was,
you can't have like 7 or 8 episodes if you find Bigfoot.
On my show, when I did
seasons.
probably 100 different shows, I tried to vet out people who would come and share an encounter or share an experience that I felt, even if it was hard to believe, at least they were approaching it and articulating what happened. It wasn't just vague, stuff. And I think all of them told their stories well. Now, I went into this thinking just because it hasn't happened to me doesn't mean that it couldn't have happened to you. So I'm going to stay open-minded. I'm not going to say BS on all my guests. I want to hear you out. I've had guests on that I hear them 6 months later on a different show. And this was a guest that I really thought had a real situation happen. They're on another show and I hear them say, we had Bigfoot outside of the trailer that night and I wanted to go out and find it, but I was afraid to go outside because my husband had been feeding roasts every night for the last week to all the dog men around our trailer. And I'm thinking, I thought this person was real, right? No. And now I'm hearing this. It kind of blew me away. Like I felt a little naive all of a sudden, right? I go back and look at the 100 guests I've had on. I'd say half of them are full of BS. When I listen to Wes Germer's 900 episodes, I'd say 80 to 90% of them are completely fabricated, embellished BS there for entertainment. These people didn't experience what they're saying they experienced. I really don't believe it.
Back and forth. Yeah.
But, I think that's why we come down to when I'm looking at who's out there making the hot sauce with their name on it and promoting this, I don't chastise people for that. I guess what I would say is I'm more interested in if somebody's out there blatantly, fraudulently trying to promote something that they know is a lie, presented as a truth in a deceptive way that just absolutely takes advantage of people who are here trying to find an answer.
Outstanding.
Yeah, those people piss me the fuck off.
Yeah, and we've seen it live. I mean, you go to a conference and you see it in real time with the people that are speaking there. Yeah. They're speaking in definitives about Bigfoot. They're telling people this is what they do and this is where they go and this is this because they know somehow they miraculously know. And we talk against that constantly. And to your point earlier, Pat, I do walk a fine line. When we started that Bigfoot podcast, it was one of those things that I wrestled with because it's my bread and butter to have people come on the show and tell their experiences. And I told Wayne going in, I said, dude, we've got to be honest here. We've got to be intellectually honest with our audience. We have to make this something different. We have to be real and we have to be raw. But I cannot come on here and bash the people that come on and pay the light bill by telling their stories on the show. And we've never done that. I've never done that to anybody. I said it about Ryan and his sex with the Sasquatch. I say this all the time. It is just as difficult, if not as impossible, to vet a hunter's story who says, I saw a Bigfoot while I was heading to my deer stand at 3:00 in the morning in Wyoming, and I saw this thing walk across the field, as it is to vet Ryan from BC, Canada, saying, I boned a Sasquatch when I was 16 in a tent. You can't vet those stories. It is absolutely impossible to do. Yeah. So I draw the line as an entertainment podcast to say, how do I do that? How do I draw the line of knowing people are going to roll their eyes in the back of their heads when they hear this guy say, yeah, the Sasquatch came in and she was hot and we did the deed when I was 16, versus a hunter saying, because I tell you, just to your point, Jeff, there are people I'm sure that have been on my podcast. We have called them out recently. There was a guy in Tennessee that came on and told this pretty compelling story about his encounter with Bigfoot. He had been on Wes's show before he came on my show. I think I was his second podcast. It might have been the other way around. I don't know. But then we watched his channel and he started telling these stories about every time he went out, he was having these Bigfoot encounters, and he was having dogman encounters, and he was being chased out of the woods, and he's posting these Bigfoot bullshit pareidolia pictures. And I don't normally call people out by name unless you're a Todd Standing or you're a Sasquatch Ontario Mike Patterson and you're making bank off of that stuff. I don't normally go after what I call the low grifter on the totem pole. No. This guy pissed me off because he went after me and Wayne in his little Facebook group that he, by the way, he only started after he came on my podcast and Wes's podcast and got a little bit of popularity. And then he started running with it with these bullshit stories. It's absolute BS. And his experiences are his experiences, but I can tell you when it comes to the evidence of him going out every time he has an experience and documenting a Bigfoot in a photo is absolute bullshit. So even to that point, we have tried to push the envelope on that Bigfoot podcast and go in and call these people out for some of the things that they're doing. So I get it when it's a little bit of an eye roll and people get a little upset with me when I maybe do a social experiment and I post something that's probably a little bit out there. But by and large, we try to keep it as entertaining as possible, but also as plausible as possible. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think the justifying balance in this, though, is not you're giving them a platform to come and share an experience that happened to them. You can't control what they're going to say. Okay, you're just asking them to articulately tell us, take us on a journey of what happened to you and draw the visual for us. But you can't control where they're going to go. It might get outlandish. It might get unbelievable, right? However, if you're not afraid to ask them the hard questions and press them when they start becoming obvious in their uncomfortable position of sharing something that maybe they've just, whether it's body language or you've heard them share it before and now all of a sudden the details changed, right? If you can press them about that and ask them about that, nobody any longer has a right to cast a stone at you for giving somebody the microphone. Okay. When you give them the microphone, they come in and they share a bunch of bullshit and you start inflating them up and pumping them up and walking them around the ring on a leash like you're at the dog show. That's a problem. But if you're willing to ask them those hard questions and press them a little bit for further details, I don't think that anybody can really take the position to and say, well, you should have never gave them the chance to tell their story.
And sometimes the only hard question I ask is towards the end of the interview, because part of my sauce is I don't do a whole lot of talking during the show. I let people have the platform. If they talk for 45 minutes and I don't say a word, I'm okay with that. I save my questions towards the end normally. And if you listen to Ryan's episode, there was a lady that we had on recently. It was in the last 4 or 5 months that claimed that Bigfoot was coming into her house and walking around at night. And she was having Bigfoot footprints in her carpet. I said, look, to both of them, what is your answer to the people, tens of thousands of people are going to listen to this? The day that it drops, they're going to either think you're the greatest thing since peanut butter and jelly, or you're absolutely batshit crazy. What do you
Well,
say?
I had Randy
You
on.
don't
as
say
a
that to a
guest.
batshit.
Hey, I think Nikki was wanting to say
Yeah,
something.
I was
I'm
going to say
sorry.
Nikki has something to say.
Yeah, sorry, Nikki, go ahead.
Well, I had a question for Brian and Wayne. How do you guys feel about people like me and Brent who have channels who call people out and who name names and who try to bring that to everybody, through our videos and what we have? I interviewed Rick Dyer, the biggest hoaxer in the all everywhere, probably.
Bless your
right?
heart.
Okay. And the things I take it as a learning experience. The things we listened to and heard him say put a whole different take on hoaxers, on what they do, how they feel, because he didn't give a damn. He was all about the money, and it was about himself. And people never heard that before,
And then the 1 hour backstage with him afterwards. If you could have put that on a Discovery Channel documentary, you would have won an Emmy for it. I mean, it was crazy.
Because he admitted in that after show, Nikki, didn't he, about the what was it, the rib or the Texas, whichever was
the
a
whole
fake video?
He said everything from beginning to end is all, because to this day he still says the tent video is real, but it's not. He talked about the actor he had inside the suit. He talked about where he did and where that actor is at, with the movies he's been in before.
So Nikki, you didn't get that recorded?
Not the backstage.
But it was but it was
witnessed
by
but the
multiple
show
people,
itself,
so.
the show itself, Wayne.
I was there.
If you watch the show itself, you'll see in the chat, this was the perfect psychological experiment of the Bigfoot community. The people in chat were losing their mind, right? Like they wanted to crucify this guy. And it was because he had no remorse for what he'd done. It was premeditated, and he was flat out telling everybody, I'd do it again all over again. If I could go back and do it again, if I could make that money, I would do it all over again. I don't care what you think. You people mean nothing to me. I'd do it all over. Zero remorse.
Wow.
And everybody in the chat was just coming undone over this.
But
damn, when was that show, Nikki?
That was my 5th
years
show.
ago.
I had just started. I was brand new to doing shows.
It was like
rebroadcast that like this weekend.
It was like 3 or 4 years ago. So I
Did you have
remember
her back
that.
on too?
2 years, 2.5 years.
Please send me
that
the
very
link to
well.
that. Nikki, please send me
one
the
didn't
link to
go
that. I want to see it.
I pissed him off, and
So
he was sick, so it was not a great show. But that first one, it showed a lot. It really, and there was a little tip there at the end with Squatch DT. Calls came on because he was talking about calls, and calls jumped on, and I let him go at it.
It's like son.
So what's up with Russell Acord and Rick Dyer? Because I saw somewhere that Rick Dyer posted something and Russell Acord were commenting. They were like buddies or something.
really,
Do y'all know anything about that?
nothing.
I know
First
Rick
up, we're-
Dyer was showing about 6 months ago on a couple different social media networks that he was going to keep moving forward in this community. He wasn't going to go dormant.
Oh God,
He was going to keep working on different projects and stuff. And I would think that he can't do that alone. He's going to have to piggyback on somebody to do that. So,
Yeah.
and
He's
if
just
you're looking at the people who are just out there for to make the buck on the entertainment, I mean, some of these people in this community, I can name probably 15 people who they call Discovery or they call one of these networks and say, I got Rick Dyer on board and we're going to do this. That network's going cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Let's do it.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
care about
What
Rick
did-
Dyer's history.
No, not at all.
This is
What
going to
did Rick?
sell
He's got a
tickets.
huge personality, and people are drawn to his words. They will come every single day just to hear what the next side gig he's got going. Okay. And it doesn't matter what he can bring in the people, and he can bring in people who like to give him money, no matter if you even tell them not to.
Well, it's very much like Todd Standing. I mean, that's one of the things that Todd has the gift of doing. He's the best used car salesman on the lot, and that's what keeps people coming back to his channel. That's what keeps giving him $3,500, $4,000, whatever he's getting to take people out for 7 days up in Radium. But to answer your question, Nikki, what I feel about you and Brent and your channels is I feel sorry for you, honestly, because what happens is I know Brent doesn't monetize his channel. I know you have a very small channel. It's growing. I was glad to see that you're like 1,300 subscribers or whatever. But here's the problem with that. And here's the difference. And this is one of the things that we've talked about on that Bigfoot podcast many times. People say Wayne and I are bitching and we're moaning and we're little bitches for hollering about other people's channels. But let me tell you what the true fact is. I have had Sasquatch Odyssey since February of 2021. Top Bigfoot podcast, one of the best in the business as far as the audio podcast side. I have to date almost 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. Guess how many Todd Standing has?
Yeah.
130,000.
Yeah.
Sasquatch Ontario, 80,000 plus. Some of these other channels, Sunny Vader's channel, I don't know how many Sunny Vader's got, but it's in the tens of thousands of people. Guess why? Because that shit that they're doing sells. What I'm doing and what you guys are doing, nobody cares about that. Guess what? I wrote a very scientific book on Bigfoot. I wrote a very serious book on Bigfoot. It came out in March of this year, sold 1,000 copies to date. Pretty good for a book.
I wrote a book on Bigfoot covering my whole encounter and some of the most innovative approaches to research that anybody's put out. And I don't think I sold 100 copies.
Okay, so I'm 1,000 copies in to 7-8 months of my book. You go online, I've got 18 reviews on Amazon. WJ Sheehan, I'm not throwing any shade at WJ. I like WJ. What he does is his Terror in the Woods is a great podcast. His books are great. He writes these sensational stories about Bigfoot. He's got like 900 reviews on Amazon. I bet he sold tens of thousands of those books. Why? Because the stories in those books and the title of that book, Bigfoot, Terror in the Woods, sells copies of books. Yeah. So you know what? We addressed this recently on the show when we were talking about some of the stuff with sex with Bigfoot and other things. You learn as an entertainer in this. If you're out to do whatever it is you're doing, you have to figure out where you get off the train and where you get on the train. And I'm going to tell you now, if you don't get on the train of what sells in Bigfoot, you're not going to be in business very long. You get left at the station. So guess what I did? You know how long it took me to write the book that I put out that came out earlier this year?
Like
it took me months. It took me a lot of months to put that book together because it was a lot of research. I just wrote a second book. I finished it actually a couple of days ago. It took me 2 weeks to write the book because it's completely fictional. It is a fictional story about Bigfoot. I think it's a fantastic story about Bigfoot that I hope people enjoy, but it's fictionalized because I'm smart enough to know, guess what people don't want to read about? They don't want to hear me write a chapter about the scientific method in Bigfoot research. They don't want to hear about the fossil record and why we don't find bodies of Bigfoot. That's the kind of stuff that's in Sasquatch Unleashed, The Truth Behind the Legend. Nobody cares. So at some point, I have to figure out and I'll be honest with you, Jeff knows, he's an author. You don't make money writing books. 1,000 books.
Here's the thing. I passed up so many opportunities to make money, and I passed up a lot.
Same here.
Mine and your friend Brian, Doug Hychek, offered me probably almost a fourth of Legend Meets Science 2 to come on, not only share my 87 encounter, but to talk about the vector collection research that I'm doing right now because it's so innovatively different and nobody else has been thinking about doing it. He wanted to feature that on there. I could have done that and probably launched a 100,000 person channel the next day. I'm not out to do that. The conversations I'm looking to have on this subject right now, to be honest, and I don't mean to sound vain, I'm not trying to sound like an asshole. The conversations I'm looking to have right now, there's very few people that seem to be articulately capable of sitting across the table and having it. I'm not here to be entertained. I'm really not here to entertain you. I'd like to find the answers to this. We can't keep repeating the shit we've been doing for 70 years since Patterson-Gimlin. It does not work. The narrative's flawed. There cannot be the number of Bigfoot people claim there are for there to be this many encounters every weekend just from people in our community going camping. It's not happening. Not at this rate. There's got to be an overwhelming majority of the new reports that are coming in are either embellished or flat out lies. Because here's one thing I'm going to tell you that most people have a hard time digesting. If you're here to be entertained, if you're watching Alaskan killer Bigfoot to be entertained, it is not morally beyond you to make up a story and claim it happened and entertain somebody else. That's not hard to do. If you're just here to be entertained, you have no problem making up a story and entertaining somebody else.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Okay, what we are all basically saying is the basic reality that there are so many people in this field with a vested interest in keeping this mystery as it is, a non-ending merry-go-round. They really have no interest in whether or not the Sasquatch is real or not. As a matter of fact, a discovery tomorrow would be one of the worst things that could happen to them because the merry-go-round just came to an end. They like it the way it is. They like the stories. They like the BS. They like going around pretending to be Mulder and Scully. I mean, they like it the way it is. And
absolutely.
So it's like you said, you mentioned Dogmen. Before Linda Godfrey wrote that book in 2008, I never heard of a single incident.
No, not one.
Not one.
They aren't drawn on cave walls across the world or woven into Native American history for centuries. Nothing.
Folklore from Europe, right?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't even make sense biologically. So it's like, I mean, but it goes to show you how like creepypasta stuff will be prevalent in the subject or in the cryptid world.
But when you look at it from the Bigfoot aspect, Thomas, what's really interesting is we had this conversation before on if I was to argue from the position that I believe is Bigfoot is real and not include my encounter in this argument, I would start by saying it's impossible that 10,000 years ago, some caveman got drunk around the fire and made up a story before there was internet or any communication, made up a story, and this got drawn on cave walls across the world, around this globe. It got woven into centuries of Native American folklore. It is so prevalent throughout history that you couldn't have started it with one guy with a stupid lying motive. It couldn't have happened that way. It had to have been existing in different areas and planting seeds in different cultures for a long time for it to become these same images, these same descriptions, all of a sudden from all over the world over centuries coming together. You couple that with the fact that there is a flesh and blood slot that exists that this creature can fit in. There isn't for Dogman. The only way Dogman could be real is if there's a supernatural explanation to it. There's no flesh and blood slot for that to fit in.
Kangaroo. Right, Brian?
I keep saying that, but apparently
that's a really good option right there. Yeah.
I've been looking at research, and they say there's no wild kangaroos in the United States.
There are.
I disagree. Damn it! I believe
they've actually released some, but
So I'll say this: in
go ahead,
the Bigfoot world, The truth does not sell until it does. It's that simple. The truth is rebuted. It's put it like people in the Bigfoot world don't want to hear like truthful things. Killing the music at the party. It doesn't sell. The truth doesn't sell until it does. Until it
Well,
does.
Truth could piss a lot of people off too. I could tell you that. Like
Nobody's
about,
ever been pissed at you, Brent. I mean, come on, who's ever been?
Brent's butchered more sacred cows on his show, and
I don't mean
felt the wrath of it.
I embrace the killing the music at the party, because what happens when you do that?
It's necessary, you know.
Everyone looks at you. You
But
have
I'll be
everyone's
honest.
attention.
You know, one thing, Brian, if I was to go to a conference, or I was to go to some sort of a meeting of people who are there for the speakers, it's not the speakers I'd be interested in. I'm not looking to buy any books. I want to sit down and I want that guy to walk up to me and say, "Can I tell you about an experience that I had?" Dude, I got my beer open and I'm on the edge of my seat. I want to hear what you're going to tell me. That's what it's all about for me. So call me ready to be entertained. Maybe I'm ready. I might have some hard questions for this dude afterward, to where he might be saying, "God, I wish I wouldn't have told him anything." But I love that.
That's my favorite part.
That's my favorite part about conferences.
That's why I like to go to conferences. That's why I take the speaking gigs. That's why I talk to, some of these conferences, I literally get to talk to thousands of people in one day. And that is gold for me, because I think conversations and any kind of experiences that people have that they can share is data that I mine, and I put it in my little repository, and then I go back and I look at it, because I'm still trying to find these answers. I have seen these creatures. I saw them I had those encounters a couple of months ago. I am no longer in the camp of if they're real. Now I'm shifting to what are they? And that's my focus. And the more I talk to people and the more I get into the stories, that's what I'm really looking for. I don't give a shit if they're real anymore. I know that's a fact because I've seen them. Now I just want to know what they are. And that's where my shift is. So we want to wind down. We don't do 3-hour podcast over here on That Bigfoot Podcast or Sasquatch Odyssey. So we're going to wind this down here in a minute. But before we go around, I want to go around the horn and talk about this and just get this last little perspective. There is an entertainment side. There is a serious researcher side, and some of us cross paths there. We have legs in both sides of the fence. Let's talk a little bit about what we do moving forward. We know that some people are going to tell stories that aren't true, but by and large, these podcasts, my show's not going anywhere. People are going to keep telling their stories. How do we reconcile both sides of the fence and work together? This come out as a conversation I had with Tom Powell recently. Tom is completely the polar opposite of me. I'm a very flesh and blood, nuts and bolts. These have to be some sort of a relic hominin. He's definitely way far out there, that farther than I am into the high strangeness and the woo part. But very much I agree with Tom when he says, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. He's going to keep doing what he's doing, and we can go and have a beer and then compare notes later. Is that where we're at in Bigfoot when it comes to this narrative? Can the existence of the entertainment part of this coexist with the hardcore research, and where do we meld the two together to further? And I'm going to use it, Pat, please don't sue me. Let's move the ball down the proverbial field. Let's start and go around the horn. I'll go with you, Wayne, and then we'll go to Jeff and go around the horn before we close out here.
Yeah, go ahead and go to Jeff. I'm going to save mine to the end.
Go ahead, Jeff.
All right. Well, one of the most interesting interviews I ever did was, in my mind, was with Ron Moorhead. And Ron Moorhead, takes on the whole other explanation for Sasquatch that goes way beyond flesh and blood. The quantum physics into the explanation, vibration, all that. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't agree with anything that he agreed with on. But I appreciated that interview, and I'll tell you why. He wasn't being rhetorical. He had put in an exuberant amount of thought to arrive at the position he has. It's a different position where I'm at, but he articulately explained why he felt that way. And I appreciated that in that conversation. Did we agree on stuff? No. But I've said this from the beginning, from when I started my show 3 years ago, is we cannot be focused on the 5% we disagree on or the 10% we disagree on. If we can set that aside and look at the 90% we agree on, we could move this thing forward. But when you put really higher up people, like and Thomas, I always think of Thomas in this example. He was doing this when the figureheads of these conversations were coming in existence and drawing their opinions and their data. And Thomas was like the hub, and each one of these horsemen and these figureheads were on the end of a spoke, and they would come to Thomas and say, "What'd that guy say about this? What did he say about that?" And Thomas would say, "You need to go ask him," right? Thomas didn't betray anybody's confidence in him. They trusted him. And that's why they all sat down with him like he was some sort of a priest in a confessional, and they spilled their guts out to him, and he became the wealth of knowledge he is. He had that relationship with people. He didn't agree with all of them. Heck, most of them he probably didn't agree with at all. But they felt they could have the conversation with him. And that's the example that we should be looking at with other people, even if they aren't on the same page as us.
Never got sucked into their personal wars. Never.
Well, he mentioned you, and I'll tell you, I'm not one to blow smoke up people's ass, Thomas, but I'll tell you this, just for everybody here and everybody in the audience, I have always had a tremendous amount of respect for you. When you were on the show a couple of years ago, it was one of the highlights, just being able to have a conversation with you. So I have always respected the way that you've done your research and the research that you've done in this field, and I always will. So we'll kick it to you. What about this narrative, the entertainment versus the narrative in Bigfoot? What say you about it?
I agree with Jeff. I mean, I know Rob Moorhead. We're friends, and we couldn't be more opposite in our opinions on this subject than you can get. But we don't let that bother us. We have serious discussions. I listen to him. He listens to me. I say, you got some points. I won't say good points, but you got some points. He says, well, you say some interesting things too, and we get along just fine. You know? He does his thing, I do mine. One of us has to be right. So that's the way I look at it. Just carry on. And to me, stick to the facts, never deviate from facts, and don't go off on wild speculation. But then again, a lot of people, that's all they do is they go off on wild speculation. But there's no reason why that speculation can't lead to something of substance at some point. So you have to take it into consideration and listen to what they have to say. But again, there's no reason why it has to be like a banging heads war. Listen to them, draw your own conclusions, and just carry on looking. That's the only way we're ever going to find an answer to this mystery. And the sad people are going to be the ones the day the mystery comes to an end, because a great piece of their reasons for existence has just gone out the window. They'll probably want to turn to something else. Suddenly Dogman will be the big one, and Sasquatch will be gone.
Or the tree octopus.
Yeah, the tree octopus or the jackalope.
Yeah, everybody's waiting on the Tree Octopus podcast that apparently Brent's going to start and Troy's going to co-host. All right, Pat, what say you about the Bigfoot narrative, my friend?
Well, again, I've seen it explode into something that is either sort of a mass psychosis, if you will, or a seance. So if it's a seance, the Bigfoot phenomena is way beyond like our explanation. If it's an undiscovered primate, the narrative doesn't fit. The narrative is false if it's an undiscovered primate, because a rare and elusive, amazing biological discovery like that simply can't reality of what the narrative is. So at this point, you know, I definitely see it for what it is in the psychological realm of people. And I think that's mostly what it is. And the little percentage that is there that I call the actual Bigfoot phenomena is simply unexplained. So there is no explanation. There is no, like, whatever woo you want to attach to it. That's just people imagining what it could be. The unexplained is just that, the unexplained. And it's starting to become a very unexplained phenomena to me, which is weird because that just brings me right back to where I started. I've kind of gone full circle. I don't know why people are seeing an 8-foot tall monkey man in the woods after 10 years. I have no idea. So narrative to me is psychological at this point, I think.
Well said, sir. And again, I just want to say thank you for being here. I appreciate you being a big man, accepting my apology. We took it way too far on that Bigfoot podcast, and I definitely took public responsibility and private responsibility for that. So I appreciate you being a part of the show and putting that behind us. Nikki, I'm not going to save you for last. You've been last all night. So I'm going to make Brent go last, and I'm going to give you the floor. What say you about this Bigfoot narrative?
You know what? I think this narrative has been around since the beginning and is going to continue to be here. We're all going to have our own take on it. We're all on our own journey. Some people are looking to find their own answers. Some want to prove it to the rest of the world. Some just want to be happy with walking in the woods with forest people. I don't know, but I love talking about it. This is just a hobby for me. I don't need this. I can walk away from this whenever I want, but I won't, because I love it. I love the people in the community. I love everything about it, and getting out and camping and, you know, going on our little excursions. And I'm not a big researcher. I'm not a researcher. I don't call myself a researcher, but I love to investigate and I love to be hands-on when I can. I know I can't do that all the time, but you know what? I don't think we're going to get any further in this last 50 years until we have something solid like a body that's going to be found. And that's okay. That's okay for me, because I'm going to keep doing what I do. I got about 15 of these books now filled with my research on Bigfoot.
Trying to get her to write a book.
Bigfoot binders. She's got Bigfoot binders, y'all.
Yeah, my Bigfoot book of shame. These are my book of shames. These aren't the good things. These are the bad things.
See, Thomas has like 25 filing cabinets full of stuff. Nikki binders.
And I have binders of look, I'm not kidding you when I tell you that I have just oodles and oodles of information, because I want to, because this is my hobby. That's
some of us actually have computers that hold these little digital file binders in them. But
yeah, I like to look at. I'm
gotta go old school.
I like paper. I like to write my notes. Because I'm old school. I don't.
But Nikki is digital in that she has a wonderful channel on YouTube that you guys can go and be a part of. All you got to do is subscribe to Sasquatch Secrets, and you can get the binders in real time with Nikki's beautiful face talking about it on her channel. So you guys go show her some love. Brent, what say you about the Bigfoot narrative, my friend?
Well, to kind of answer your original question, that about the is there ever going to be a unity with the Bigfoot entertainment and the Bigfoot research? And the answer is no. There's never going to be a full unity, and that's okay. There doesn't need to be. We just have to recognize the people who have the same goals and values that we do, and we go gravitate towards them, and recognize the entertainment side for what it is and use it as for what it is. It's not something that I turn to for research value or anything like that. I just kind of get what it is. I just let it go on its own. it really doesn't bug me that much unless it's somebody that's out there nefariously, trying to scam or lie or be deceitful or something like that. I will totally, make them an example of, what to watch out for. But so, when it comes to the narrative, it's just, it doesn't matter if somebody's into the entertainment side, because that's just probably what they want in life. That's what they want out of the subject at this particular moment in time. I was there. I loved the whole narrative, the whole stories and all that stuff. Loved the death out of it, but now I don't, and because I'm more focused on finding the truth, and it's been that way for many years. But I recognize that there's a lot of people that are in different stages of their journey. I've been doing this for about 10 years now and been pretty solid obsessive about it. But I recognize that there's some people just coming into this subject only, are just really kind of tapping the surface of it, not really engaged in a way that I am. What they don't they don't really care about what I value. They just kind of care about more what what they can kind of get from it, which is this entertainment, this escapism, which I think a lot of people want and need in the subject. And so for me, I just try to respect that and just recognize for what it is, not get bogged down and bothered by it, but try and talk about it. And one of the ways that like what you're doing right now is a really good thing for both sides to better understand and articulate what they value and what their goals are. And hey, can some of the people on both sides intertwine together? Absolutely. I do it all the time with different people. But again, it's just, you have to find the right people that share those same values with you, and that you can work good with. And when you do that, I think it will really enhance your own investigation, your own experience into the subject, because you're not going to be constantly bothered by all the negative narratives that are kind of going around and stuff that you can't control. They will always be out there. There will always be more and more. And again, sometimes that might not be a bad thing, because the entertainment side might bring in that person that's going to solve the Bigfoot mystery. So, it's one of those things that we have to be open to. But I appreciate you having us on here to better understand it and articulate it, so we can, move forward in a way that is progressive for the actual subject itself on getting those answers and stuff. And, once Bigfoot is discovered, if ever, then the stories and all that stuff will kind of fade away into the back burner. And that's kind of what it is.
And the fact is, if I could choose one person in this community to ever have lunch with, I might just pick Peter Kane. Honestly, the guy makes me laugh so damn hard. I think I might pick him over most everybody out here. So,
how dare you?
I'm glad that you're going to have lunch with him. I'm definitely not. If you guys want to get more of Brent and what Brent is all about, check out The Tall Ones and The Tall Ones Dark and show him some love. You guys go subscribe and check out his videos over on YouTube. It's a phenomenal stuff that you're frankly not going to see anywhere else, frankly. So you guys go check it out. Wayne, what say you about the Bigfoot narrative, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, all I can really say is, since I've been a part of this community, I've met some of the best people that I've ever known. No matter what you think about it, about the subject, what we do, what Brian and I do, what other people do with their shows, that other, wildly successful show, whatever got you included or involved in this community. It's a great community. Some of the best people I have ever known. We're not going to come up with answers tonight. We're not going to get answers to anything. Some of the best people I've ever met have been because of this. Whatever you think of it, going forward, I don't know. I can't speak to that. But I just feel like moving forward, if we all work together, we're going to get further. So let's just try to focus on doing that.
Very well said. Wayne always gets the last word, but before we get out of here, I want to say thank you to Jeff, Brent, Nikki, Thomas, Pat. Thank you guys so much for having the conversation and being a part of this. I do think these kind of conversations are very important on channels like this. There's a lot of people that won't be entertained by it, but I think there's a lot of people out there that need to hear this stuff. So we're going to keep kind of pushing the envelope and having these kind of conversations, because I think it's very important for our community moving forward, no matter what happens. But as always, Wayne, you get the last word on the show, my friend.
Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. All of the support is very, very much appreciated. Please keep those ratings and reviews coming in. Until we talk to y'all again, y'all take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Bye.
Bye.